Well, thank you for having me here today. I greatly appreciate it, and I'd really like to thank AGAT Labs for having these sessions. You know, the whole energy environment subject has become so polarized and so emotional and so even hateful at times that it's important to have calm, rational, informative discussions to bring the temperature down. So that's part of what I try and do in these talks, is bring the whole temperature down so we can have rational discussions on what's a very important subject, energy and the environment. You know, we've been in COVID for 2 years now. Seems like 20 sometimes, but it's been 2 years. And in that time, the energy world has changed dramatically as well. When COVID started, we saw a collapse in energy prices, and now we've seen a great rebound to today's very strong prices. We have a lot of geopolitical uncertainty. The Ukraine and Iran come to mind. We've seen a huge focus worldwide on greenhouse gas reductions. We've seen a complete lack of investment in oil and gas globally in the last 2 years. Here in Canada, we've had a brutal wake-up call on the need for Indigenous reconciliation. We had the IEA report last May, which outlined a path to net zero. We had the IPCC report last September, which told us we're not doing very well in reducing emissions. And we've had a great increase in government debt, particularly here in Canada, which is going to limit our government's ability to address future problems. And of course, we need to kickstart the economy to pay for all this debt. So a lot has changed, and all of that affects energy. I'm going to address just a little bit of that today. You know, I'm a former CEO of an oil and gas company, and whenever you tell anybody you're the CEO of an oil and gas company, this is what they hear. So I want to be clear that that's not me. And so if I may, before I start, I'd like to introduce myself. Why do I talk about energy? Why do I talk about the environment? What turns my crank? What drives me? This is my cottage. It's in Ontario on a beautiful Canadian Shield Lake. I show it here in the winter. It's a bit easier to see. There's nothing particularly spectacular about it. It's a very modest building. But what I want to bring to your attention is the solar panels on my roof. I'm passionate about energy, every kind of energy. I graduated university in mechanical engineering and I focused on nuclear power. I spent my career in oil and gas. 17 years ago, I put solar panels on my roof. These are thermal panels. They heat our well water for hot water. We have electric backup. We're not about to have cold showers. I don't need solar panels. I was just fascinated. What are they like? Can you get enough energy out of them? Do they work? Do they work in the winter? I'm passionate about energy, every kind of energy. I'm also passionate about this country. This is a great country from coast to coast to coast. The opportunities we have, the safety and security we enjoy every day, the beauty and expanse of our landscape is unavailable virtually anywhere else in the world. My son took this picture when we canoed the Wind River in the Yukon. And you have to put the Yukon in perspective. The Yukon is 35% larger than the country of Germany, the entire country, just the Yukon. Germany has 83 million people. The Yukon has 40,000, 30,000 of whom live in Whitehorse. This is a park. This is pristine Canadian wilderness at its best. To get to the Yukon, to the Wind River, you fly to Whitehorse. You drive 5 hours north to a little town called Mayo. You get on a float plane. You fly 150 kilometers east. You get put down a little lake called McCluskey Lake. You portage a half a kilometer to a tributary of the Wind River. You have to line your canoes about 2 kilometers down this tributary because it's too small to canoe down. And then you get to the Wind River. The next place the plane can land to pick you up is 14 days downriver. You are on the river. In those 14 days, you're not going to see another human being. You're not going to see a piece of litter. You're not going to see a table, a cabin, a chair. You're not going to see any sign of civilization. If you want to see Canada at its absolute best, go north. This is a spectacular country. Let's talk about energy. This is energy scarcity. When you don't have energy, you don't have proper food, clean water, you don't have schools, roads, buildings, you live in abject poverty. Too much of the world lives like this. This is energy abundance. I show Calgary here at night, all lit up like a Christmas tree. We are very fortunate here in Canada. We have abundant energy. 99% of Canadians probably have no idea where their energy even comes from because they don't think about it. It's just there every day. When was the last time you walked into a room, flicked the light switch on and went, phew, the lights came on? I mean, you don't even think about it. We're very fortunate in Canada. We have great energy abundance. So let's go through the numbers. There's about 7.7 billion people on Earth, and about 1.6 billion live as we do from an energy perspective. So we're the lucky ones. So that's Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Western Russia. And we consume, on average, 37 barrels of oil of energy a year per person. Now, that's all forms of energy expressed in oil. So that includes wind, solar, nuclear, coal, oil and gas, all expressed in oil, which I'll do throughout this presentation. So we consume 37 barrels. We're the lucky ones. The next 3 billion people consume a little more than a third of that. China, Turkey, Mexico, Brazil, about 14 barrels. The next 2 billion consume less than 4 barrels of energy a year, and there's almost 1 billion people on this earth who consume 1 barrel of oil per year, 1 barrel of energy. As your energy consumption increases, your standard of living increases, your life expectancy increases, your education increases. As your level of energy decreases, your consumption decreases, your chances of dying from respiratory failure or poor water and sanitation increases dramatically because you're burning cruder and cruder forms of energy. The billion people on this earth who burn 1 barrel of oil a year, it's mostly coal, wood, and cow dung. In 2022, people are still burning cow dung on this earth to heat their food. I show this beautiful young girl in India drying cow dung so it can be burned to heat their meals. Could you imagine your children doing this or heating your meals with cow dung? We need to get this world energy, every kind of energy, solar, wind, geothermal, nuclear, oil and gas. We need it all. This world needs energy. And then there's Canada, us. We use 75 barrels of oil per year. And we use twice the average of the Western world. And so why are we such energy gluttons here in Canada? Well, we're a big country. Transportation consumes a lot. We're an industrious country. We are involved in many energy-intensive industries, oil and gas, mining, agriculture, forestry. We make steel, we make aluminum, copper, cars, planes. All these things take a lot of energy. And we lead a phenomenally high quality of life. We come to nice buildings like this. We live in nice homes. We drive nice cars. We go on nice holidays. All of those things take energy. We are energy gluttons here in Canada. We consume twice the average of the Western world. Renewables. I'm a huge fan of renewables. This is fascinating stuff. It's getting better every day. It's hard to keep up. In the last 20 years, globally, renewable energy has gone from about 1 million barrels a day of oil equivalent to about 15. So say 0 to 15, keep the numbers around. Which is fantastic progress, and I show some great projects around the world here, geothermal, wind, solar. I zoom in on this one here. This is Palm Desert. Anybody who's been there has seen this, thousands of turbines. There's 4,000 wind turbines there. It's a fascinating site. My wife and I went there 3 years ago. It was our first time there. It was her birthday, and so the weekend was all about her. And she told me that money was no object. So I took her on an all-expenses guided tour, all-expenses paid guided tour of the wind farm facility. This is why she loves me so much. But it was a fascinating tour. It was a fascinating thing to see. But when you look at renewables in the scale of global energy, the red on the right is the same 0 to 15 of renewables compared to other sources of energy on this planet. In the same time, renewables have gone from 0 to 15. Just the increase in oil, natural gas, and coal has been about 75 million barrels a day. The energy market is huge. Now, some interesting things here. Renewables now exceed nuclear on the planet. Nuclear is still a valuable source of energy. But after a few incidents in the world, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island in the United States, Fukushima in Japan, it has stalled the last couple of decades. Hydro is still growing, but there's only so many large-scale hydro sites left on this earth. Hydro will not be a material part of growth in the future. Oil and gas continue to rise dramatically, and coal has kind of plateaued. We've pretty well gotten off coal here in Alberta for electrical generation, so many other places are trying too, the UK, Germany, but there's still hundreds of coal power plants being built on the planet, so coal will still be around for a while. So let's talk about energy transition. It's kind of the topic of the decade. Everybody talks about we're in an energy transition, and we are, and this is not the first transition we've gone through as a society. So I went back over 200 years here, back to the year 1800, and looked at energy transitions. Back in 1800, the primary and really the only source of fuel on the planet was wood. And then about 1850, coal came along, and again, this is the British Industrial Revolution. Coal came along, and the world started to get off of wood and move on to coal, because coal contains a lot more energy. So that took about 60 years before coal became the dominant source of energy on the planet. Then in the early 1900s, oil and gas came along and started to displace coal. So the world started to rely primarily on oil and gas. And again, that took about another 60 years before oil was the dominant source of energy on the planet. And then nuclear came along, and nuclear started to grow until the few incidents I mentioned, and it's plateaued, and renewable now has a measurable amount of energy on the planet, about 5%. And historically, all the energy transitions kept going to forms of energy with higher and higher energy density. So a kilogram of coal contains more energy than a kilogram of wood. A kilogram of oil contains more than a kilogram of coal. And a kilogram of uranium, of course, has infinitely more energy than a kilogram of oil. Now, according to the IEA and their road to net zero, in the next 28 years, renewables are going to become 61% of our energy. Nuclear and hydro will grow, and oil and gas and coal will become marginal players in the energy industry. I'm 100% for emissions reductions. I do think we have to use energy differently and smarter, but I just cannot foresee this happening because renewables, beyond being much less, lower in energy density, they're intermittent. Today, wind farms, if it's a 100 megawatt wind farm, it'll produce 100 megawatts about 40% of the time onshore, maybe 50 offshore. And of course, solar facilities are about 25% efficient. So I just can't picture the scenario where we're going to shift to so many renewables and have reliable energy. I'll talk about it a bit more later. Let's look at the same energy transition, but instead of percent of energy provided, this is showing the absolute amount of energy provided. So again, back in 1800, it was all wood. In 1850, so we're talking 170 years ago now, we start switching off of wood onto coal. And fast forward to today, 170 years later, we're burning 50% more wood than when we started getting off of wood 170 years ago. And the same is true for coal. We started getting off coal around 1910, so it's been 110 years. We burn 5.5 times as much coal today as we did 110 years ago when we started getting off coal. And of course, the reason is the growth of energy. The demand for energy is growing so rapidly. And now the IEA is saying we're going to become more efficient, so we're at peak energy demand, and not only are we going to use renewables, but we're going to use less energy going forward. I find that a preposterous statement for a number of reasons. One, there are 6 billion people on the planet today who are trying to get to our standard of living, something closer to our standard of living. That takes a lot of energy. Between now and 2050, the world's population is going to grow by another 2 billion people. We have to feed them, clothe them, educate them, provide roads, hospitals. That takes a lot of energy. And even us who have a lot of energy, we keep thinking of ways to use more energy. Think Bitcoin. There's such a demand for energy, I just cannot see this happening. There has to be a better plan. And even the IEA report acknowledges that we don't have the technology today to achieve this. So the IEA is relying on efficiency, and unfortunately, Mr. William Stanley Jevons is going to rain on their parade a little bit. He was a British economist, and he wrote that as technology improves to increase efficiency, you actually use more energy, not less. And he wrote this in 1865. He was talking about the British Industrial Revolution. And I'll show you a few examples. This is still true today. These examples are a bit from my perspective. I'm 63 years old. If you're younger than me, you'll just have to follow along. But, this is not my family, but we had a car just like that when I was a child. And life was good. We had a car. Families had a car. My dad got to work. We went skiing once in a while. We went camping. We went to visit friends. You had a car. Life was good. Fast forward to today, your typical suburban scene, multiple cars in the driveway. Well, what happened? Well, cars got cheaper relative to income. There's more roads, there's better roads, you can get more places, you can get there faster, you can get there safer, you can get further on a liter of gasoline. We got more and more efficient, and we used more and more gasoline. Same with Christmas lights. Here's a house in the 1960s, there's the Volkswagen Beetle again in the driveway, and that's an AMC Gremlin at the curb there for anybody old enough to remember those. This house is in the Christmas spirit. They have their Christmas lights up on their east trough, the incandescent lights. And then we came up with LED lights, 1/10 the energy requirement of incandescent bulbs. Just think of all the energy we're going to save. Mr. Jevons died in 1882 at the ripe old age of 46, but I'm very happy to say that his spirit is alive and well in Victoria, BC, and in our nation's capital. And I'm not picking on these cities. I can show any city in the country. Let's talk about emissions. There's a lot of focus on the energy industry. They have to reduce emissions, and we do. There's no question about it. We do. We get no hall pass, no get out of jail free. But let's look where emissions occur. So about 10% of emissions are oil and gas production. So this is drilling, completions, getting it out of the ground, trucking it to the terminal, wherever. Another roughly 10% is pipelines, refining, getting it to your gas station. But 80% of emissions is you and me when we make the decision to do something. Start our car, take a flight, go on a cruise, buy a new iPhone. All those things take energy. That's where 80% of the emissions occur. So what are you willing to do to reduce that? And to give an example, how many of you have had this discussion with your kids at home around the kitchen table? Kids, we were going to go to Disneyland this year and go see Mickey and Pluto and Snow White and ride Space Mountain. And that sounds like fun. But Mom and Dad have been talking, we have a better idea. Instead of doing that and emitting greenhouse gases flying down to California or Florida, why don't we stay home and put another foot of insulation in the attic, and we're going to replace our old double glazed windows with brand new triple glazed, low E, argon filled thermal windows. Come on, kids, how exciting is that? Tough conversations. I don't think anybody's had that conversation, but we are going to have to look at our lifestyles to reduce emissions. And I'm not pointing fingers. I'm as guilty as anybody else. My wife and I, we love to go cycling in Europe. We used to, pre-COVID, tried to go once a year. Can't wait to start that again. We love to go on adventure trips all over the place. We went to Iceland, alpine touring a couple of years ago. We travel a lot in Canada. We've been cycling, canoeing, backpacking all over this great country. We like to go visit our parents. My mother lives in Toronto. She's 92. My wife's family is in Quebec City. What are your post-pandemic plans, and how much energy do they involve? It's really easy for people to be environmentalists when they tell other people what to do. It's really hard when we have to look at what we have to do because it affects our lifestyle. Okay, there's big pressure here in Canada to disinvest in oil and gas. University endowments are disinvesting, pension funds. And they're putting great pressure on the financial markets. Don't invest in oil and gas equities, on the banks. Don't lend the money, on the insurance companies. Don't insure their projects. And that's fine. It's a free country. They're free to pursue any cause they like. But let's look at this. And I show here the top 6 oil producers on Earth and the top 6 natural gas producers. I'll go through the flags quickly because they're not all obvious. So on the oil side, United States, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Canada, Iraq, United Arab Emirates. On the natural gas side, United States, Russia, Iran, Qatar, China, Canada. So let's say these people are successful. Congratulations, you win, we lose. The energy industry in Canada shut down. Now we and the rest of the world have to get our energy from these other countries. And we can do that. We're going to live a lower standard of living, but we can do that. But let me ask you a few questions. If we and everybody else get our energy from these other countries, which one of these countries has better worker safety standards than Canada? Which one of these countries has better gender equality standards than Canada? Which one of these countries has higher ethical standards than Canada? Which one of these countries has greater religious freedom than Canada? Which one of these countries has greater Indigenous consultation and participation standards than Canada? Which one of these countries has higher environmental standards than Canada? If any of those issues are important to you, and I hope all those issues are important to you, but if any of them are, we should be doubling down on our investment in Canadian energy. We're really good at what we do here in Canada, and we need to stand up for ourselves. So we have a choice. Do we get our energy from other places? I show an oil field in Iraq. Or from here in Canada, I show, this is East Coast Canada. When we talk about energy, especially in Alberta, we think of the western part of Canada, but of course there's a very active energy industry on the East Coast as well. Let's talk about Indigenous participation. Since Europeans came to North America 500 years ago, for the first 500 years, the whole attitude towards Indigenous Canadians was assimilation. And of course, I don't have to tell anybody that didn't work out very well. It wasn't until the late 1900s where we finally realized that we have an obligation to consult and that Indigenous Canadians have a right to a say in the development of Canadian lands. And then around the turn of the century, that bar was raised a bit higher with the concept of FPIC, free, prior, and informed consent. And then quite all of a sudden, it seemed to me, about 5-7 years ago, all of a sudden there was direct Indigenous participation in these projects, equity ownership and management. And I think that's the future of resources here in Canada. I think it's a great thing. I'll give a number of examples here. The Northern Gateway Pipeline, Enbridge committed to having 1/3 equity ownership to the Indigenous communities along the route, and they committed that within 5 years of completion of construction, there'd be a Indigenous president of Northern Gateway. Of course, the federal government scrapped that project, so that's not going to happen. This is the Watay Power Project, Northwest Ontario, north of Thunder Bay, 24 Indigenous communities. Right now, they're getting their energy from burning diesel generators. It's unreliable, it's very high emissions. They're putting in a massive electric distribution system to tie them into the Ontario grid. It's going to be managed, owned, and operated by the First Nations that they're being served, long-term prosperity for these First Nations. Of course, Suncor has been a leader for a long time in the Fort McMurray area with partnerships with the Indigenous communities. Pembina announced their Cedar LNG project, 50% ownership with the Haisla First Nations. 50% ownership, Clearwater Seafoods on the East Coast. The Henvey Inlet Wind Farm, this is between Parry Sound and Sudbury in Ontario. 50% Indigenous ownership. And there's 2 Indigenous groups vying for ownership of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. I quote Dale Swampy here. Dale Swampy lives in Calgary. He's president of the National Coalition of Chiefs. The whole raison d'etre of the National Coalition of Chiefs is to eliminate on-reserve poverty by having direct involvement, management, ownership of Canada's natural resources. Dale's a good friend and a wonderful person. Now let's look at our emission targets. So in 2019, the planet, we emitted 36 gigatons of CO2. According to the Paris Agreement, we're going to reduce that by 15 gigatons by 2030 and a further 21 gigatons by 2050. As I said, I'm a strong believer that we need to reduce emissions, so I certainly hope we can make this happen, but I want to illustrate the magnitude of what we're talking about. In 2020, when COVID hit, the world shut down. We all remember that. We didn't go to work, we stayed home, we didn't drive, we didn't fly, we didn't go to restaurants. Global emissions in 2020 dropped by 2.6 gigatons. So in the next 8 years, we have to do 6 times that to achieve 15 gigatons. It's a monumental task. You know, we have a huge task ahead of us, and I am, for one, I'm not sure how we're going to get there. And then there's Canada's role in that. So if we achieve our Paris goals, that's our contribution, 0.2 gigatons, and 2050, another 0.6 gigatons. So Canada is a small contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. We're 1.6%. Now, that doesn't mean we get a free pass. We have to reduce our emissions too. But I quote Jim Gray here, and some of you might know Jim Gray. He co-founded Canadian Hunter. He's well known in Calgary. He says, you know, we have to avoid allowing the size, complexity, and scale of the issue shake the foundation of our country for no material benefit or reward. You know, if we shut this country down tomorrow, we all stopped heating our homes, stopped cooking our food, stopped driving, stopped flying, stopped manufacturing, everything, we all move into a cave. We would reduce global emissions 1.6%. And it's not like the rest of the world would say, oh, Canada, we really appreciate that. We'll take care of you guys. We're all going to be living in a cave. And of course, all the goods that we produce, including energy, are just going to be produced somewhere else now. So global emissions wouldn't drop a single molecule. So I'm not saying let's not reduce emissions. Of course, we have to reduce emissions. But let's keep our head on straight, and let's not ruin the country economically or divide the country over the issue. Let's have a calm conversation. And I don't think our political parties help either. And by the way, I'm not endorsing any political party here. I'm very apolitical. This is just their stance in the last election. And so I'll go through that. So the Conservatives stuck to the 30% Paris commitment. The Liberals had a very interesting week, April of last year, almost a year ago. On Friday, April 16th, they were also at 30%. And then on Monday, April 19th, they released their budget. And they said, we're raising our expectation to 36% reduction by 2030. So that was on Monday. And then on Thursday, Canada attended the Joe Biden Virtual Environmental Summit. And Canada raised their commitment to 40 to 45%. So we raised our commitment somewhere between 33 and 50% in less than a week, with absolutely no plan of how to get there. So the NDP said, well, we're going to do better than that. We're going to reduce emissions by 50% by 2030. And of course, the Green Party, by definition, had to consume that. So they said, we're going to go to 60%. I find this irresponsible. None of these parties have any clue on how to accomplish this. There still isn't a plan on how to accomplish this. Let's calm things down. These kind of political games, I find, are very distracting. People are arguing over what the percentage will be. Let's focus on how we're actually going to do it. Let's get to our 30% commitment as soon as we can, and then let's start going how we can get further. But I find this kind of political posturing, game playing, irresponsible, and again, I can point to any of the parties. So what do we do about it? I put things in two buckets. One is what we can do today. No problem, we have the technology. We might have to change a few things, but we can do. And the other one is technology we need for the future. So we are gonna have to look at our lifestyle. Again, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm as guilty as anybody. I show this house here in the winter with an outdoor pool, hot tubs, spas, saunas. We use energy in this country like there's no tomorrow. And, I just got rid of my hot tub. I have a house in Fernie, I ski there. And we got rid of our hot tub last year because I just felt so guilty. We heat this thing 365 days a year. We might use it 10 times in a year, once every 30 days. And it's heated all year. I just thought, this is madness. I just can't do this. Of course, data banks, Bitcoin, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all these things take massive amounts of energy. To what purpose, and how do you stop that? I don't know. I took this picture cycling home from work a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic. This is on 9th Avenue. I was at a traffic light on my bike, and I just took this picture because I look at this parking lot and not a single car. It's all SUVs. And again, I'm guilty. My wife and I each have a vehicle. One of them is an SUV. But why do we drive such big vehicles? 70% of us, next vehicle we buy, pickup truck or SUV. And of course, how we go on vacation. I took this picture in Fernie last summer, these massive trailers, massive RVs, driving all over the country, getting 3 miles to the gallon. We have to start looking at our lifestyle. And as I say, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm as guilty as anybody. And that applies to agriculture too, not just beef, but agriculture is a huge emitter of CO2. We have to start doing things a little smarter. This, to me, is the lowest hanging fruit we have here in Canada, and that's energy efficiency. Why, in this day and age, with such a focus on greenhouse gas emissions, do we still build the buildings to such low standards? And that goes both residentially and commercially. We could easily build them to much higher standards with not much cost and have drastically lower emissions. You can still build homes in Calgary with double glazed windows. Why is that? It just doesn't make sense. Electrical transmission, we have 80% of the electricity produced in Canada is already GHG emission-free, hydro and nuclear. But unfortunately, we don't have it everywhere in the country. So the Maritimes, Saskatchewan, Alberta, we don't have hydro. So on the East Coast, they built the Maritime Transmission Link to share energy from Labrador with Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. It was very expensive, but they did it. We're too big of a country to have a single grid, but we could certainly have an east grid and a west grid. We tend to build lines more to the US. But unfortunately in Canada, we have these provincial fiefdoms when it comes to electricity. So there hasn't been a lot of cooperation going on. We can do better than that. Cars, we're going to be driving EVs. There's so many coming to market now. Tesla, of course, was a leader, but anybody who's driven one, they're absolutely fantastic. And of course, there's going to be more and more renewable energy. It keeps getting better. Look forward to that. And we have to do a better job on non-renewable energy. I show this as a conceptual drawing of an LNG plant. But, the Shell LNG plant being built in Kitimat is the lowest emission LNG plant in the world. Again, we're good at it here in Canada. If we want to help other nations get off of coal, we need to provide them an alternative. This is a great alternative. So why aren't we building more of these plants? And yes, we can do it to a much higher standard. And then there's the new technologies, things we need to develop. And fortunately, there's a number of them. Hydrogen gets a lot of press these days. I do think there's a role for hydrogen, but hydrogen is not that easy. It's very abundant. It's the most abundant element. But unfortunately, it doesn't exist as hydrogen. It's usually part of a water molecule, and it takes a lot of energy to split the molecule. And also, hydrogen is very difficult to store and transport. The reason hydrogen today is used where hydrogen is produced is because it's difficult to store and transport. But I do think there is some role, certainly, for hydrogen. Nuclear, both small modular and large scale, has to come back. If we are really serious about emissions, there's nothing else that we know of today that can produce electricity 24/7, 365 days a year without interruption besides nuclear. France recommitted to nuclear yesterday. Now, some people oppose nuclear because it produces long-term, high-level radioactive waste, and that's true, it does. We have the technology to deal with that. No form of energy is impact-free. There's no other solution that we have today that can solve our problem. Carbon capture and sequestration, again, some people oppose this because they say it allows us to continue to use hydrocarbons, but we are going to continue to use hydrocarbons, so let's do it smarter. Let's figure this out. Tidal is not a huge source globally. There's an experimental project in the Bay of Fundy, but it's very reliable. Tide goes in and out twice a day. It's very strong. Nuclear fusion, this is the holy grail of energy, nuclear fusion. It's been 20 years out for the last 50 years. This year, for the first time, they've run fusion reactors where they've actually produced more energy than they've had to put into it. And so nuclear reactors today are fission reactors. They split the uranium atom. In a fusion reactor, you combine two hydrogen atoms, and it produces a lot of energy. This is how the sun works. But to date, we have not been able to run it sustainably and produce more energy than has to go into it. Just to give you one idea of how difficult nuclear fusion is, the core of a nuclear fusion reactor operates at 100 million degrees Celsius. And I bet none of your instruments go to 100 million degrees Celsius. I can't even comprehend that, but it's mind-boggling. Direct air capture, again, taking CO2 that's already in the atmosphere, out of the atmosphere. There's a firm in BC, in Vancouver, that's doing a lot of work on this. Can they do it economically? I don't know. I hope so. And of course, here in Alberta, we've had a big commitment from the oil sands producers to be net zero. They have a pretty good idea how they can probably get 60% of the way there, and then they have to develop technology that we don't have today to get the rest of the way there. So could they do it today? No. It's going to take some new technology. And by the way, I look upon this, our kids have been scared out of their minds about climate change and CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. I look upon this as opportunity. Look at all the great things you can get involved in, all the great things that have to be discovered, all the things you can do that can impact this world. This is a fantastic opportunity. I don't think we should be scaring our kids. We should get them excited about this. Every generation has its challenges. This is the challenge of the next generation. This is fantastic. There's tons of opportunity here. So courage to build. Any Canadian knows this shot. The last spike in 1885, Canada ended at the Ontario border. BC said, we'll join, but you have to build us a railway. So we did. It was finished at Craigellachie, last spike. It was a hugely audacious, courageous project. The Trans-Canada Highway, built in the 1960s, east to west, north to south, still the main artery of the nation. It took a lot of guts to build something on that size in Canada, but we did it. The Trans-Canada natural gas pipeline to Ontario and Quebec gets a little cold in Ontario and Quebec today, no problem. They turn up their thermostat. They have safe, reliable natural gas because we had the guts to build this pipeline in the 1950s. The ports of Canada, I show a few here, Toronto, Montreal, Halifax, Vancouver. Can you imagine today proposing a port on ocean waterfront? You'd be shut down in a nanosecond. We need these to export what we produce, to import what we need. This is the Valero refinery. It's just across the river from the Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City. If you've ever been there, the next time you go there and you're on that beautiful terrace, look to your right a little bit, you'll see the lights. It imports 230,000 barrels a day of foreign crude to be refined and distributed around Eastern Canada, Ontario, Quebec. And this is how they get their jet fuel, diesel fuel, gasoline. They say they're against oil and gas in Quebec. They're not against this. We need this infrastructure. St. Lawrence Seaway, of course, Canada, the United States, built this in the 50s, still in use today, still a very important thoroughfare to connect the Great Lakes to the world markets. Fantastic, bold project. James Bay in Quebec, 16,500 megawatts of power, more than all of Alberta produces. Built in the 70s. There's a reason today Quebec has cheap, reliable, non-greenhouse gas emitting power. They had the guts to build this. The Confederation Bridge, this was opened in 1997, only 25 years ago. It's the longest bridge in the world that goes over frozen waters in the Northumberland Strait. It was a very bold project, improved the life for people on Prince Edward Island. They have reliable access to New Brunswick. 25 years ago, we had a lot of guts. This is the Wacky Bennett Dam, W.C. Bennett Dam officially. It's in Hudson Hope, BC, just outside of Fort St. John, 2,700 megawatts of power built in the 1970s. There's a reason BC has safe, reliable, non-emitting power because they had the guts to build this. Do we have the courage to keep building? use LNG and nuclear as an example. I sure hope so. You know, I don't care where you live in this country, and I don't care how old you are. I don't care what your education is. I don't care who you vote for. I don't care what religion you practice. I don't care what language you speak at home. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care who you love. I don't care what you think about the economy. I don't care what you think about the environment. You lead a better life every single day because we had the guts to build these things. We have to get our guts back, our courage back, our mojo back, and start building this country again. We have to do it to the highest environmental standards in the world. We have to do it with full Indigenous participation. Let's get our guts back and our courage back and start building this country again. I want to wish all of you a future filled with responsible energy abundance, and I want to thank you for your time.